Welcome everyone to a new live tutorial that will help you prep for graded assignment 5. This one is all about the DOM and fetching JSON and using forms and how you can use JavaScript in the DOM to manipulate the page and create a dynamic experience for the user. I have got, you can see already, I've got some code here that has, an images folder. So I've got some little images we'll work with. I've got the index page. I've got the HTML already set. There's a lot of code here and I don't want to freak you guys out. We are absolutely going to focus on the DOM and the form and just the event listeners and that aspect of things. In order to have this page fully functional, there's quite a lot of functions that I've written for you that are kind of down here at the bottom. And we'll look at them in detail in a little bit, but you don't have to worry about coming up with some of this stuff. It's I've got it for you. What is going to be important is in here where you're actually hooking everything up and making what's in here actually communicate with what's in the page, so that the user can actually, click buttons and see things happen and all kinds of amazing stuff. There is a README here. This is actually looks better in GitHub. Hang on, I'll switch back to the thing and show you. Yeah, okay. So just so you know, anything I've got in GitHub, if I have something other than, if there's nothing here but a README on the main branch, you can go here and you can look for other branches. There's also going to be a starter code branch here. And I also created a branch kind of midway that shows what the solution is before we get into the animation at the end, because that is, totally bonus content, right? But then here's the full solution. So you'll see the starter code here. You can always come in and switch around and look at things. If you decide to come up here and fork it and then clone it from here in your own account, you will be, probably taking it down to your local computer, and then you'll be like, wait, where's the files? So this kind of explains, if you open it up in VS Code, for example, here, once you have forked it to your own account and cloned it down, you can actually look, right here, if you do git branch, it'll show you which branches are available and which one you're in. And then down here, you can use, git checkout and then the name of the branch to switch branches. And then all of the code will show up that is the correct version for that branch. And every time you switch branches, you'll see a new version of the code. That's how Git works. That's why they call it version control, because you can have several copies of it in different places. So you can switch around to those any old time. So just so you know, that's kind of how that works. All right, I'm gonna get this off here. And okay. So that's what that's about. It's just easier to read it on GitHub because the images show up. Okay, we have a sample of the JSON that's coming in. I'm going to show you that in just a second. And of course, scripts.js and styles.js. And here again, I have prepared all of this for you. I do not want you to have to focus on trying to come up with CSS for this. That would take a long time, especially for those of you who are very new at it. And I only have commented out the things that are to do with the animation. So when we get to that point, we'll come in and we'll uncomment them so that they can be applied. So for now, let's start by looking at the API. So let me tell you what we're going to do. We are going to create a page that a person can come to and look for drink recipes. Primarily, they're cocktail recipes, but there are a lot of other drinks in there, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic. And there's this public API, which if I pull this over, I can show you. Yeah, this is called the Cocktail DB for database. And this person who's created this has a whole lot of different ways for free for people to access the data. And so you can search for a cocktail by a specific name. You can search by first letter. We're actually going to make use of that. You can search for ingredients by name. There's a lot of different ways to go look things up. And there's also down here, which is going to be useful for us, a way to list categories, the type of glass you would use for a drink, what the ingredients are, or whether it's alcoholic or not. Or there's actually a third filter there that's like optional alcohol. we are going to make use of that of the categories one, so that we can get a list of categories, because we want to have a form that has a little drop down box that has all the categories already there for them to choose from. And so that's going to be really useful. But basically, they give you all of these endpoints. That's what they're called when you're working with an API with different URLs that have, these query parameters on the end that you were just learning about. They can, let me zoom this in a little bit so you guys can read better. But yeah, so they provide all these different things. We really just, have to look through and decide what's most useful. In the end, I came to the conclusion that the best thing for our purposes to do is to pull in all of the drinks at the beginning and just hold them right there in the application. And then we will have another variable that has an array of some of those drinks when we're filtering to show them the results of their search. Does that make sense? And that way we don't have to keep going and fetching over and over and over again. We'll just have the data and then we can do whatever we want with it. So we're really only we're gonna use this to do that and just go look it up one letter of the alphabet at a time. It's the best way I could find to do that, the way that this API works. There isn't really a way to go and just get the entire list all at once. And then we're gonna use this one to just go get that list of categories. And this is one that you are going to see me kind of help you write together. The big one is the one that I've already written because it's gotten a little complicated. So in this, I went to this thing and I was just like, okay, let's go see what this data is, right? So I just copy it and open up a fresh window and stick it in there and see what it brings back. And generally speaking, if it's something like JSON, it's just going to bring it back and show it to you. And that's kind of ugly because it's not formatted, but you can get the general idea. There's an initial property called drinks, and then there's an array, and in that array are multiple objects, and each of them have just one key and one value, what the category is, and it's the ordinary drink. Category cocktail, category milk, floats, /shake. And when you see those backslashes in there, it means that they're escaping out those slashes so that the data isn't interpreted as actually being like part of something else that has to be done with certain characters. You see it again down here. Okay, so that, I looked at it and I was like, okay, so I know what I can do with that now. I just need to go and, fetch that from this endpoint that we just copied in. And then I know what the JSON looks like. And then I can just go into drinks and, go through these one at a time and then structure it the way I want for my data, which in my case is going to be to just have an array of strings. I don't want an array of objects like this. So you'll see that. And then what I did is I did the same thing with the other one we're going to use up here, which is, did I go too far? Didn't go far enough. Okay, which is the one to look them up by letter. And I grabbed one of the, samples, and I just made this little sample file, and I put it in here and used my, formatter in here to make it look nice so it's easy to read. And so we can kind of get into this and look at this, right? Same thing. They start with a single drinks property. It's a single object, not an array. But then the array is actually in that property. And in this case, I only have one drink represented, but you when we call it, we'll end up having like tons, right? But it has all these different properties to look at, and every API is different. It wholly depends on who structures it, what they decide to call things. But you kind of have to look at what their system is so that you can figure out how you can grab that data and put it in a form that you can work with for your application. And in this case, I decided, okay, I want the name, so I'm going to grab that one. I want the category, so I'm going to get that. I want whether it's alcoholic or not, I'm going to get that. I want what kind of glass it is. I want the instructions, and I want them in English, which is kind of their first one here. And then you can see they've got a bunch of other languages. And then I want this is kind of why I ended up going with this API, guys. They have pictures. Every single record has a picture, which is super fun. And you'll get to see how that works out once we start building this app. So that's the link to get to the picture. And then, of course, there's ingredients. Now, here's where it gets a little bit funny. Because for whatever reason, instead of just having an ingredients array and a measures array, or putting, putting everything like where you could just have them, you know, side by side, like in parallel. So you know that index 1 here goes with index, you know, I'm sorry, index 0 here goes with index 0 here, etc. They put them in all of these different ingredients. So that's why I had to write a more complicated fetch function to actually change it, like go grab all of these and then put them in an array together with this. I concatenated it together, and you'll see that in a little bit. And that's it. I didn't use anything after that. So that's the structure. I decided to include that. It's really helpful to come look at it so you can understand how their JSON is structured for the drink objects. Okay. So we've got instructions here, which looks really long, but that's because there's a lot to do. And I think I'm probably going to need to edit them just a little bit before I officially post this, once the video's on YouTube and everything. But I will make sure it's all there for you as needed. Okay, so style scripts, and you saw the index too. We had, oh, yeah. Because you need to kind of have an idea of what this structure is, since you didn't create it, I did. And you're kind of need to be able to see where you're going, right? So as always, an HTML document starts out with this stuff. And when you have a style sheet, you link it here. And when you have Google Fonts, you link them here. We're gonna see that later once we get into the styling part. And then of course, there's your script that has to be linked in order for your JavaScript to be able to read and communicate to this file. To save things that are in these elements, give them new values, or take them out, or there's lots of different things it can do. So I've gone with a fairly classic structure here. We have a header that has a title and a tagline and a little logo. And then we have a main section. The first main part of it is a form. And the second part is the results area. So you can see, you know, we'll have this form. The user will go in and say, I want to search for, you know, a cocktail that has gin in it or whatever, you know, and then we'll provide the results back, and the results will come back in this area. And there's two things going on here that are important to understand. One is that the search results area and the no results area are mutually exclusive. What I mean by that is that we'll only ever be showing them one at a time. We're going to control their visibility with the display property in the style. And so the display will be none if we want to look at one and not the other, and then it'll be called a display block when we do want to view one and not the other. And we're going to, you know, wire all of that up in our listeners to change the status of each of these so that we can make sure that if there are results and that we want the recipe cards to come out and be visible, they'll show up here. And if there aren't any results, or at the very beginning when they haven't done a search yet, then we're going to have, you know, a little bit of text here and an image of an empty glass, and you'll see that in a second because it's still there. And then the footer just has a little link to the cocktail database API. I figured that's the right thing to do when we're using a public API, is to give them a little bit of credit. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Does anybody have questions about this before I move on to the script?
I have a real quick question about that sample.json file. Is that really just for the benefit of seeing it laid out for reference, or is it required? Do you need to have that there?
Oh, no, it's just for reference.
Okay.
Yeah, because otherwise you have to do what I did before, which is to go, you know, up here and actually go get it. And, you know, even so, it's like if I wanted right now, and let's do this, because why not, right? I'll grab all of that JSON right there, and I'll come in here and I'm going to create a new file and call it sample categories.json. And we'll paste that in, and then I've got this extension that allows me to do that.
Okay.
And now you can see very clearly what the structure is.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah. And by the way, the extension I use, I think, in this one is, let me see. That might just be I don't think I have it. There's an extension called Prettier that I use on my work computer that's really nice. It does a lot of things. But that, all I did was on a Mac anyway, was Shift Command P, which brings this up. And then I just, you can type it in if it's not up here, but because I use it a lot, it's the first thing up here. Format document, and then just, hit enter and it goes. And that's what took care of that. So yeah, it made it nice and pretty for us.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay. All right. So you've got an idea of kind of, how this is set up. We've got, you're going to see it on the page in a second, but we've got some radio buttons. We've got a select, a drop-down menu. We've got a regular text input. You can see right there, type equals text. And then we have two buttons, type submit and type reset. And I just want to point out now, I think I'll mention it again later, but if you specify the type, that's for the browser's benefit. And it has specific things it takes care of depending on what you submit. So like with reset, it knows if we hit that button, just go ahead and blank out all of the input fields for that form. Because it's built to do that. And we don't have to actually go and write code to say, take the value out of this one, take the value out of that one. It just does it for us. So there you go. So let's actually take a look at this thing, hey? And you can see what state it is in right now. And it is pretty ugly because there's no styling. And we will make it pretty eventually. But let's just go over this. So you saw this in the HTML, right? And I can actually put it side by side here. Give me a second. Sort of see this side by side. Okay. So the very first thing up here is the image. It's like I'm just going to need to point at it. Is the image? Got that? Then you've got the title right here. And this, the reason these are together was in order for formatting. Once we have the CSS, to put them side by side, it's just a Flexbox thing. So now you have the title and the tagline, and you see both of those. Then we come down to the form. We've got this kind of title for the whole box called Find Recipes, and we see it here. Then we've got those radio buttons, and then there's the drop down, which has nothing in it right now, but we're going to take care of that. And then there's the text input to search for a name or ingredient. And then there's the button, search and clear all, which is that reset button. And then you see down here that we've got this, results area. And right now, the one that's showing is the empty glass and the no results text, which is search for recipes above. So that's kind of where we're starting out. And then here's our footer down here, the drink recipes courtesy of the Cocktail BB. So everything is here. It's just not functional yet. That's what we're going to do today. So let's get on it now that we have all of our explanations. Okay, so over here in instructions, we need to start by fetching data. And I think I've already uncommented the script button, so we're good there. So we need to go and initialize some arrays. And there's three things that we're going to need for this. Right here. We're going to need all drinks, which is going to hold the data that we pull from JSON. And we're going to always keep that full so that we have access to all of its records. I believe there are 417 of them. And then there's going to be current drinks, which is the one we're going to use to hold the filtered ones for displaying. And that value will change constantly depending on the search. And then we also have categories. And we just want to set them all empty because these two we are going to be filling with the fetch. And this one, like I said, will manipulate as we have the search logic going on. But it's important for all three of these to be here globally, because we are going to use them inside listeners, we're going to use them inside init, and then also below init, we have a bunch of helper functions down here that also need to be able to access it. So like you can see right here, this one's accessing current drinks. This is the filter. This is where it's going through and checking all the information from the form and winnowing it down to just what the user wants. So those have to be up here. And similarly, we're later on when we get ready to do the styling, we're going to have some special like variable color classes here so that the recipe cards are color coded, and we'll add that in. But this is going to look familiar to you. You've got a window load listener, right? First thing you've got to have, that's what actually kind of starts the page being able to connect with this file. And so it loads, and then we're going to call a fetch function. Now, what's surprising here is we're not going to call init. And the reason for that is because we're fetching data, we need to make sure that our data is in place before we try to display things on the page. And so the way you can kind of get around that is to call your fetch function here and then call init from the fetch function to make sure that it doesn't get called until it's actually got that data back. Because I know sometimes the idea of promises, which you guys were learning about with fetch, this idea that you ask for data, and it's kind of like let's go down and look at this other function. Hold on, it's going to be here. Yeah, let's go down and look at this. So when you get into the fetch, and you guys have seen this, at first you go and you say, hey, I want to get some data from you, and then there's like this middle one, right, that says, okay, hold on, wait a second, I'll be right back. And then it goes and actually like finds it and brings it back. And then you can move on and actually work with it when it gets here. That's where that JSON comes back. So while you're waiting for all that to happen, the code is moving on. And so, this one, for example, because we're looping through the alphabet so that we can use, this in conjunction with whichever letter we're on. So right here, our full URL takes this and adds on the letter. It's going to, be making 26 calls to this API, each with a different letter of the alphabet, and that's on a loop. And so in this case, I'm calling fetch categories at the end of that. Ordinarily, you would want to call it up somewhere up in here. And I just realized this is here and isn't supposed to be here because we were going to write it. Sorry about that. That's okay. We'll talk through it. So this is the first thing we need to do. Fetch categories. So we have a classic kind of, fetch block here that first goes to this URL. This is the one we were looking at that, C equals list on the end. Can you guys read things okay? Is that better? So we go and we look at that, and then when the response comes, we've got that JSON, we're going to go ahead and say that we want all of the category objects, that array of objects is JSON.drinks. And we saw that, right? Because the whole JSON, there's the drinks policy, property, and everything's in an array. So that's how we're accessing that. And so we say we want this, local property right here that we've created to be equal to JSON.drinks. So now we have an array of those objects, and it's not our objects yet, it's this object. We've got several of them. And I just realized I'm talking back about drinks again. So really what I mean is this one. We have these objects. And we just want to go through them one at a time and grab this value from this property. So what that looks like is, here we go. We're going to go and we're going to map through. Who has not seen map before? Has anybody not seen map? Okay, maybe.
Oh, sorry, real quick.
Yeah.
I had one question, and I don't know how important this is, but right after your then, inside the parentheses, you have a space. And I saw this in the textbook too, and I was curious why. Is that just, I don't know.
It's optional. I think it's just to make things clear because so many things are crammed together. It makes it easier to kind of visually jump to that function. Okay. And the other thing is sometimes you'll see arrow functions here. So instead of function, you'll see JSON and then the fat arrow, and it means the exact same thing.
I see. Okay.
So you might see it this way and you might see it this way, but they mean the same thing.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure. Okay, but either way, what it is it's a an anonymous function that you can go ahead and have all the logic for right here in line. So yeah, so once we have that array that we saw in the sample, we're going to take our categories array. Now that's the one from way up here, and we're going to set it equal to, I went too far. We're going to set it equal to the results of this mapping. So we take their array and we go through it one by one, and we're going to, this is kind of like the idea of a for in loop where you give it a name. So each object is represented now by the name category. And this arrow basically means for each of these, do this. It's a very shorthand way of doing it in another anonymous function. And what we want, map actually takes one array and creates a new array of the same length. So for every single thing that it finds here, it's going to give us in this array, it's going to put something else that we define here. And what we've defined that we want is to go to the category object that is in their array, get that string category property and get its value. And then I've added a little something extra in here because I noticed, and you may have too, that they have spaces in here, like in between their things, and it ends up kind of looking weird, and maybe it's just me, but I didn't like it. So I went and I actually created this to split everything out on that space slash space and then join it back together with just a slash so that it looks a little better when it comes out. And then we use the array function sort that's built into JavaScript just to put them all in alphabetical order. And I've got this little console log so that we can kind of see when it comes back, categories loaded, which when you're first writing everything and you're trying to figure out what order everything is coming back in because it's asynchronous and those promises are there, but you don't know how long it's going to take for the data to come back. It can help you sometimes to have something to refer to in the developer tools, which, right here. The last thing here, this is what I was talking about before. We're calling init now that this is done. We couldn't even do this until the data was back. So we know for sure that it's back, which means now we can go ahead and call init, which is where all of the objects and the event listeners and a lot of other things that interact with the page live. And that's going to control what the user sees as soon as the page loads. So all this stuff is going on before the user sees anything. So let's see, like if I want right now we could add some things in to kind of see, like when you first do this, it might be a good idea before you even write any of this logic to just make sure you've got, this, actually you could just do it for the JSON really. Before you do this, but it doesn't matter, I'll do it here. So let's see what happens when, let me make sure I've still got, nope, we haven't called it yet. So let's call, that's why I didn't see anything. Fetch categories. And all we have to do is just call it like that. So basically, I'll just move this over and that way we can definitely read everything that's here. Basically, what you got going on here is that we can see that the JSON showed up because we see that drinks property and then we see all of their objects, string category and ordinary drink. And then it says categories loaded. And now, of course, we're starting to get in trouble because there's some things in here that haven't been defined yet that, it's looking for. And that's actually what I was working on before we started, was trying to make sure that not too much of that stuff is going to happen since we're building this a little bit at a time. And it's okay because it didn't break the page. We're still able to kind of see what's going on here, and things still aren't functional, but at least we know our data came in the way we wanted, right? We reached out to that API and we got the data we wanted from them. So we have it and now we can work with it. So then when you get, to the next step, we could do another console log here and actually see, categories. And if we do this console log here, we're not only going to see what was created here, we're also going to see it sorted. So we would expect to see it in alphabetical order here. So let's try looking at that. And there we go. So there's their data that we got from the API, and here's our data that we transformed. And this actually is an array that looks like this, right? Up here that you can kind of see. But they also, the devs tools will also break it down and say, here's index 1. This is the one that's index 1. This is the one that's index or 0, and then 1 and 2 and 3. So, but this is what I was expecting is, to see them in alphabetical order in an array. So everything there is working as expected. So what we don't see, and I'm curious about, is the drinks, because, oh, right. I didn't follow my instructions, guys. So what was actually supposed to be here was fetch drinks, because I'll show you. We want to fetch drinks. We want drinks to get started first because there's so much data to return. So we get that one started up here. Sorry, I keep scrolling down too far. Yeah, and this one, it goes through, loops through. Every time it finds JSON for all of the ones that are of that letter of the alphabet, it goes and gets all of the objects into an array, and then we, actually, that's the drinks by letter. Same thing, we go and look at it drink by drink, and for each one of these, this is all that extra stuff I was talking about. I had to handle the fact that they had 15 different properties for ingredients and 15 different properties for measures. So I went through and I basically said, okay, take the ingredient for this one and take the for that one with whatever's on the end, because you might recall they're called string ingredient 1, string ingredient 2. So what I did was loop through and use the numbers to actually tack that onto the end so it would look at them one at a time, but I didn't have to like hard code it out because that would be insane. And so it goes through all of them and gets that, and then it's checking to make sure it actually exists or not. There's a lot going on here. This is why I wrote it for you. And then it pushes it into the ingredient list, depending on whether it also has a measure or if it's just an ingredient. And then we get down here, and this is what you're used to, which is creating an object that has new properties. This is the kind of stuff you've been doing. So, don't worry too much about all this stuff up here. This and what we just did right here is kind of more what you're accustomed to and what you need to do for assignment 5. So here I've gone and said, here's the categories I'm interested in. This is what I want to call them for my object, but I have to go and actually get them from what they call them in their object. So name is drink.string drink, and category is drink.string category. And here again, I did the same thing I did with the categories list and fixed the way that spacing is done around those slashes. Type is drink.string alcoholic, glass is drink.string glass. Ingredients is ingredient list, and the reason for that is because I already accessed all of their data up here and created that ingredient list, and now I'm just assigning it to this property so that that array of strings will be there. And then here, directions, I go back to their data and get a specific thing, and then same with the image, and most of these are just strings, so it's very straightforward. And then once I have finished with one letter of the alphabet, I'm going to go to all drinks and say, I want you to add in everything in this drinks by letter array that we just pushed all of this into. And we're using concat for that. There are other ways to do it, but this is, I think, one that you guys are more familiar with because you've used it before. You take an array and you concatenate it with another array, and what results from that is a single array with all of the elements just side by side. It's not an array of arrays, and that's what we want. We want, like, if this was 1, 2, 3, and this was 4 by 6. I'm sorry, 4, 5, 6. We would result in an array that was just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all equal, with commas between them, and not like an array of 1, 2, 3. And an array of 4, 5, 6. Does that make sense? So that's important because we need all drinks to continue adding in additional drink objects. And these are our objects that look like this. And we're going to build it until we've got all of the letters of the alphabet accounted for. The other reason that this is a good way to do this is because this is asynchronous. We're making 26 different calls to this API. And they're not all going to come back in the right order. Just because we looped through A, B, C, D, E, etc., does not mean that they're going to come back that way. And I actually, before I created the sort function, I was able to prove that because arrays were, and we can actually probably see it later. Once we have things functional, we can temporarily take off that sort function and you guys can see what I mean. And it was like different every time. Sometimes it would be, starting with the M's and sometimes it was the J's and you just kind of never knew. And then from there, we call fetch categories. Then the thing we just wrote is, here, and I'm going to take these console logs out now that we're done with them, clean things up a little bit, except for that one. And then we call init. Okay, so now when this is, so good, no, it's not defined. Let's see, 37, where is it calling that? Line 37, something I must not have. Oh yeah, I'm trying to call an event listener on a button that doesn't exist yet. Okay, that's to be expected. I was trying to kind of frame this thing out to make it a little easier for everybody to see what's where. And actually, speaking of seeing what's where, why don't I talk about how I structured this a little bit? Because when you have a more complex app, it can get real overwhelming real fast to think about what's supposed to go where. Like, what do I have to have inside init? What has to be outside of init? What has to be inside of a listener? What can be outside of a listener? So there's going to be here, and we already kind of talked about these global properties up here that we have access to. And you can see that I have all of these functions down here. This is the sort function we're going to use. And it takes in information and it's manipulating a global array. So this one doesn't have a return value. And this is just a helper function for this to make sure that the objects are actually clones of the objects and not references to the original object. Because you might remember with arrays and objects, anything that has nested data, it's actually like a data structure. You can't just make a copy of it, say this equals this, or else it's just going to refer back to the original one. You have to have another way. And this object.assign does that for us. So this is every time we have something and we want to actually copy it over. And don't worry about what all this means. It's pretty complex and we don't have time to cover it. But it's a better sort because it's recursive. So it splits all the data and it just keeps kind of splitting it out and then it brings it all back recursively until everything's sorted. I have this filtered drinks thing that I've written, that's out here, and the same thing. It takes in these values and it just manipulates a global array. So it does what we need it to do, and it does not have anything that requires it to be inside of init or inside one of the listeners. Here we have a couple of functions that are going to set the HTML that goes inside some of our objects on the page. And same thing, we call them and we create stuff based on the information that we're finding that comes from our categories array, which is global. And then we just return those options wherever we're calling it from, and then we have what we need. Same with this one. We're going to set these recipe cards. They're going to have a lot of information. We're going to have, this kind of initial thing here where we show the number of results on the page. And then we're going to have each of the, this for each is kind of like map, but it puts things together differently. It doesn't do like an array the way that map does. Map produces an array. So in this case, what we're basically doing is having it just accomplish something, which is to take this results that we've established here with the initial information and just keep adding on a new recipe card for each one of the drinks that it comes across. So this is the whole recipe card, aptly named recipe card. And there's a photo section and there's a some like fancy stuff, and then like I've got some color bars and stuff to kind of make it look pretty. And then there's actually the information. We have the name, the category, the type, all the ingredients, which up here we mapped out to put them into list items for this unordered list. And so then we just put them between there. And then the directions, and then a little sentence about telling them what type of glass is traditional for that type of drink. And then the rest of the styling stuff. So I went ahead and provided this for you because it's a lot to kind of, set up in conjunction with the CSS. And I don't want you to have to concentrate on that, but I do want you to understand it, because when you see the layout on the page, once we are able to produce results, you'll be able to kind of see how this is all fitting together. So this takes care of that. Same thing though, it just returns results. It's basically returning a really big string. Like if it was all 417 records, you can imagine it's just a really big string of lots and lots and lots of HTML. And then it's just going to put it into place on the page for us, and we're gonna make it visible. So yeah, all of these do not need to be inside a init, because they just either manipulate a global property like an array, or they produce information, they return information back when they're called, that can then be used from wherever it's called in. And in our fetch stuff, same thing. We're going and getting some data and we're saving it in a global variable. So all of this stuff down here is below init. And I went ahead and kind of put this like little note here, end of init, because it gets really long once you start adding all the code. And I wanted to kind of be clear, we are no longer in init. This is the bracket that ends it. And then we move on, right? But we have a couple of handler functions in here for our click listeners. Here's the actual click listeners, one for submit and one for reset. And then here's where we're going to create our objects, which is what we're going to do next. And here is where we populate the dropdown with that fetch data that we got of the categories. So, and then later on, we're going to do the animation stuff, but that's going to be last. So the first thing we need is to start getting some of these objects in here. I think that my references are just off, but I'll fix that in the instructions later. Okay, so we want to create these, and we want to create them as constants, because they're while the data that's coming through them, the value of them might change. You have to remember that these are objects that actually represent an element on the page in the HTML. So that never changes. You want that link from this variable to that object on the page to be the same. So because of that, we want to go ahead and just make those constants so we can't accidentally overwrite anything with this. And we always have access to that object in the page. So we'll do kind of the normal syntax for this, except for that. Get element by ID, and then we can go get keyword / input. And if you're not sure what they are because you haven't been working on it for 2 days like me, you can go over to it. Man, Zoom bar is in the way. I'm having trouble getting to what I want. Okay, I should just use it over here. Okay. You can go over here and check and see what was that thing called again, and then you kind of yeah, that ID right there. That this one's called keyword input, and then we're going to create one for the category one, and we're going to create one for the buttons, and we just want to make sure we call them by the right thing so that it knows where to find them. So category const, category input. And then this one is category input. I try to name them to be as straightforward as possible. All right, submit button. Now our submit button will exist, so this listener down here will quit complaining that it couldn't find it. Same thing, get elements. Oh, see, sorry. That's what I get for tabbing over and not paying attention. It chose the wrong one. These are all supposed to be get element by ID. We're not looking for a list of things, just one thing. All right, and then the last one, of course, is the reset button. Now it's catching on. Okay, all right. So we've got those first four, and then now we need to do the stuff that's down below the form in the search area. I'm sorry, the results area. So we'll get search results. And just as a reminder of what that represents, that is this specific area right here, where all of the recipe cards will be displayed. So we need to be able to tell it where to put all that information once it comes back from our functions. Okay, so document ID, and then search results. Notice that all of the names here are camel case, and all of these are hyphenated. That's standard for what we're doing. All right, no results is similar to search results, but it's the other one, the one below it, that will only show when there are no cards out. And so this is gonna hold our little message and our little empty glass object. And no results text, that's the other one. I knew it was my one. Would help if I'd read the instructions, right? Okay, okay. And this one represents that text that's below the picture of the glass, because we want to be able to change its value. So we can have different messages at different times. And this is exactly like that, what I just described is exactly the kind of stuff you're going to be doing on your assignment. You know, going and finding a specific element and making sure that its text is variable so it can be changed depending on what happens. Okay, so we've got those taken care of. Now check our instructions here. And yeah, we're totally in B and not C. So I'm gonna fix all of that, guys, sorry. We got those. All right, so now we want to populate that category dropdown. So you remember that over here, right now, this thing, you know, nothing happens, there's nothing there. So it's not opening up and it's not displaying anything. Let's fix that. We have a thing already in place here that is actually going to set those options. We just have to call it. So, you know, it's going to start with a string that just says, you know, with a single, the first option is going to say category optional. That way, because, oh, sorry, man. I dragged it over, didn't mean to. You know, like when you're on the page and you're looking at it, you could put a label next to it that says category, but it's a little cleaner and if you don't. And so that way, this kind of indicates to them, this is what you're going to be looking at if you open up this drop down, right? But we're also telling them it's optional. You don't have to select something. So that we start out there and then we add to that and keep adding an additional option for every single one of the categories that's in that array we created from our JSON. That was the one that we were, you know, seeing in the log that had those 11 different categories. So this will pull that string and keep adding to it and build it, and then return the entire thing. So all we have to do is say, you know, we want to make sure that that goes inside here. Yeah. We want to make sure it goes inside this category input, the select, which is a drop down. So we're going to go to our object category input that we connected to this one. And we're going to access the inner HTML, which you guys are familiar with, and just set it equal to this, not that. I went too far. No, I didn't go far enough. We're going to set it equal to this. And let me just copy this, in fact. And that way, whatever value is returned, that's what's going to be stored in the inner HTML. So let's do that here. We're going to say that category input dot inner HTML, everything inside of that select, is going to be equal to that. It's that simple, because I went ahead and put all of it into a separate function. So all I have to do is go call that function, get that screen back with all of those options that have been created from what's now stored in the categories, and then they should show up. So let's go test it. Let's go look and see. Wrong way. Hey, check that out. We have ourselves a dropdown. So it put everything in there just as expected, and it starts off with this one. And our logic will know to ignore, like I've created some logic that knows to ignore it if it's actually still set to category optional. It's only going to actually filter on the rest of the stuff in here. So you don't have to worry about that either. Okay, so we get that done, and pretty much we've got our objects and we've got our thing. So the next thing to do is to listen for events, so we can start using those buttons and they'll actually do something. So let's see, we've got one more object we need to add. And just so we're clear, like all of these I put just inside init because they're needed by a lot of different things inside init, different listeners, different other functions. But there's one that we couldn't put in here. Which one's missing? It's the type input, right? The radio buttons. And the reason it's missing is because we don't ever need to access all three of them at once. We only need the one that's checked. But if we were to access it out here, it would bring back null because nothing is selected when the page first loads. And it would never get changed. But what we want to happen is for the user to submit the button and then for it to go and see which one's checked and return that. And it might turn, it might be one, it might be a different one. We don't know. And that's why we have to be able to check again and again and again. Only whatever one is clicked when the button is clicked. So let's create that here. And this is similar to some of the like a studio you did the other day, I think, in one of your exercises, where I forgot. So in this one, because the value can change, we're going to use let's type input, and we're going to set it equal to document dot query selector, and we're going to use that different syntax that you guys have been learning, where we say use the brackets, right? And then say, and oh, I'm sorry, it has to be input first. We're going and finding an input element. And then we use the brackets to actually designate what it is we're looking for. And we are looking for name equals type. Notice that nothing in there has any additional quotes. It's just name equals type. And what we're referring to is right here, where there's this name attribute on each of the inputs. So it's going to input and checking name equals, oh, type input. I forgot I changed that. Let me fix that. Type input, yeah. And that'll actually, like, it would try to go get all three of them, and that doesn't work. What we're really looking for is which one is checked. So we add that little pseudo selector on that basically says to the browser, because the browser knows that this is something that is just something that the browser keeps track of. So if one of them is checked and you go in, it's going to bring back the right one. It'll bring back the one that's checked. And this is all you have to do to tell it how to find it. And then it'll store just that one. So depending on which one's selected, that variable right there, type input, could be connected to this one, or it could be connected to this one, or it could be connected to this one. And each time it might be different. So that's important. But when it connects with one of them, then we have access to the value, which is different for each of them. And that's why you have to have a little bit of extra syntax, and it's why you have to have it inside the listener so that you get the value right when that submit button is clicked, and then can do it again when it's clicked again, and it might be different. Okay. So we do that, and we're not going to do the validation just yet. Let's see. So we're going to call a handler function here. Before we do it, let's go down and create it, and kind of fill it out here. Basically, when you have something that has a lot of additional steps, it can be a really good idea to break it out into another function, right? So that's pretty much all I've done here. You could have kept it inside the listener, and the listener would just be really long. But I decided to go ahead and create a separate function called HandleSubmitClick. And that way we kind of are distinguishing between the listener and the handler. Instead of doing them all in one, we're separating it out. And in this case, because that type input only exists inside here, we actually have to pass it through. So when we call this, we're actually going to pass type input into the function, and then it shows up here as a parameter and we can use it. So the first thing to do is to skip that because that's for the animation later. We're going to give current drinks all of the objects. So basically, current drinks already exist, it's just empty, and we're going to fill it up, so to speak. When you do this, there are a couple different ways to do it, but one of the most straightforward ways is to say all drinks, but you can't just say all drinks because, like I mentioned before, anything that is a data structure is a reference variable, and so that would just point back to all drinks and memory. And then if we start making changes to this, it's going to change this one too, because they aren't two separate things. They're actually the same thing, just with two different names. So in order to get around that, we basically can just take a slice of the whole thing. And when you want the whole thing, you don't even have to put anything, but if you put 0, it would mean the same thing, just to go from 0 to the end. So you can do it either way, but taking a slice of this entire array allows you to basically copy its contents. And now you have another array that has the same contents, but they have two completely different references to memory. So that's important. Okay, and then we're going to call our filter drinks, and we're going to pass in all 3 of the input values. So we want to filter them by the user's input. So, oh, I said pass in, didn't I? Right. Notice that because filter drinks exists down there and it's got the parameters, it's suggesting to me, you know, which one they are. That can be really useful if you like forget what order they're supposed to be in or whatever. It's right there. So that tells me I can put in type, and I'm using type and not type input because remember, type input is not accessible from here. It's only accessible here. So that's why we're going to pass it in. And then it shows up here as type. So I'm using it as type where I do have access to it. And I've just given it a slightly different name to differentiate. And then we want the category. So that will actually be category input. And then we want the keyword input. All right, so we pass all of those in and just call it. And that takes care of it. There's no return value. We don't need to store this in a variable of any kind because it just goes to current drinks and starts changing it so that it only holds the things that match what the user asked for. And then and we can go back and we can take a look at that real quick. So let's come down here. All right, so basically we're coming in with type, category, and keyword, right? If type is equal to alcoholic, then we want to filter. This is another one of these functions that uses an anonymous function, and I've got it done with the fat arrow style. And it basically just says, go through every single one of the drinks and current drinks. And here's what you're going to do as you're going through. Here's the function. You're going to come back with that drink, that same drink, and put it in an array. Back into this array. You're going to leave it in the array if it matches this case. And that is, this is a Boolean statement, right? So you're basically saying, like, as long as it's not non-alcoholic, we want it to still be included in drinks. So what filter does is say anything that doesn't match this is going to get removed from current drinks, and then it leaves in there the ones that actually match it. Does that make sense? I might have been talking a little circuitously, so I wanted to make sure you understood. I mean, we can talk about it again on the next one. So this one does the same thing. It goes and looks, if it's non-alcoholic, then we're just going to go and check, drink by drink. We're going to use this filter thing. Look at current drinks and look at it drink by drink. And for each one, if this is true, if the drinks type we have to make sure to check for case sensitivity there, is not alcoholic, then we want it to be included. Now, this might seem a little bit backwards to you, like why are we using non-alcoholic with alcoholic and vice versa? The reason is because there is that third option that says alcohol optional or optional alcohol. I think that's it. So basically what we want is that if they ask for alcoholic drinks, we want to include things that are both alcoholic and optional. And then if they ask for non-alcoholic, we want to include things that are both non-alcoholic and optional. So it's easier just to say, this is the one I don't want, give me the other two, right? This is the one I don't want, give me the other two. So that's why we're using a kind of like double negative right there to get what we want. It's easier than having to say equals non-alcoholic and, or if it equals optional alcohol. We just leave that out and simplify it. Okay, so it'll do those. Notice that this one's mutually exclusive because it would be. We know that our select buttons are mutually exclusive. And if they have both checked, then it's just going to pass this up altogether because we're not going to be filtering on this at all. So then we get to category. And basically, we're just saying as long as they did, in fact, select a category and it is not, this, then we want to filter on whether the category of the drink that we're looking at is the same as the category that they requested. So drink.category is referring to this current drink of the whole current drinks array. This category refers to the one that we passed in up here, which is the one they requested. That make sense? Okay, so the last one, same thing, except in this case, we have to do the filtering a little bit differently. We only need to know that this isn't blank. And then we can, activate this kind of check. But instead of filtering on a simple kind of comparison, first we have to actually go and look and see if it is in there. So what I did was create a variable called name and ingredients that concatenates the current drink's name and ingredients into one string to check, because we want to check both of them. We want to be able to say if it matches one of the names of the drinks, or if it's an ingredient in the drink, it'll bring back that drink for them to look at. But rather than having to do it in two separate ones, since it's all just one big string it's checking anyway, why not just concatenate them together and save a little space, right? So we concatenate them together, and then let's see. Oh yeah, okay. So this one we are concatenating with this one. And basically I was just taking, because ingredients is an array, the easiest thing to do is to join it and make it a string and then just set it to lowercase. And then you have the name and all of the ingredients in one big long string. And then you can check that string to find the index of the keyword, also to lowercase, that they gave us, that we passed in way up here. And if it's not equal to -1, that means it exists, because if you guys remember, index of will return -1 if it can't find it. So I know this is kind of a double negative thing again, but it's more straightforward to do it this way. So check this whole big string we created of the current drink's name and ingredients, and then see if we can find the keyword inside that string anywhere. And if we can, it'll come back with pause as 0 or greater, in which case filter will keep it in current drinks. But if this actually is -1, then it's going to filter it out. Okay, so I know that was a bit of a long explanation, but I as a student, I didn't really learn about these things right away, and they're great. They really save you a lot of work. I think I'm probably going to put together a reference for you guys at some point soon, where it actually kind of shows you, like, here's what you've learned on the left about how to do things with, for loops and lots of conditionals and, like 15 lines of code. And here's how you can use things like, dot filter and dot map and dot for each to get it down to like 2 or 3 lines of code. Because when you get into the working world, this is the kind of stuff you're going to be doing all the time. You're not going to be writing it in 15 lines anymore. Okay. So we have filtered it. Let's get back up to our little handler here, right? We're in HandleSubmitClick. We filtered it. It is now officially filtered. So we're ready to display it to them. So here's the logic. We want to do things differently depending on whether there's a results, because it's conceivable and actually probable that they could have a combination of categories and ingredients that just don't return any results. And we have to have a way to handle that. So if there are results, if the length of current drinks that has been filtered down is greater than 0, then first we sort, and I have a sort by name. That's that recursive thing I showed you earlier. So we're going to sort by name, and that takes 3 parameters. It takes the array, current drinks, and then it takes the starting and end point. So we'll go from 0, and then we'll go all the way to current drinks dot length -1. Okay, and that's all we have to do. And now current drinks is sorted because we were manipulating an array that exists globally. And so once we do this, it's done. And now when we go to use this, everything should be in order. Okay, now we have some values we need to update, which is mentioned right here. Search results enter HTML. It's actually, I have these notes so that you guys can go read the full instructions of what each part. So there's more information if you go read the instructions. The values, let's see. So for search results, we want to update the value. We want to update its inner HTML specifically, because remember, this is just an object. We can't assign text to it. We have to actually assign it to here. And okay, so this is where we actually want all of the cards, right? We want everything that's going to be displayed of all the recipes that are in that thing. So we have this thing down here that I've created for you. So we're kind of back to this, right? We've got set recipe cards, and that is going to return eventually this whole result string that holds the initial count of how many drinks were found. And then it'll have card by card all of the recipes for each drink, and it'll be nice and formatted with all the classes from the CSS once we get that hooked up. So we'll come back up here to let's HandleSubmitClick, and I'm just going to set that equal because it returns that string, and now the search results area will hold all of that HTML. And then later when we do the animations, we'll have some additional stuff we can do right here. But let's see, no results needs to be added. No results dot style dot display. And we want to set that, let's see, so we're displaying results, which means the no results section needs to go away, right? So we're going to set display to none, and that'll make that happen. Basically going back and forth between none and block, and that's how it decides whether it's going to show it or not. Okay, Mary Fallon says otherwise change the value of no results text. Okay, so here's our other no results text dot enter HTML is equal to, and I want to check my notes again because I have a different message for different things. Oh yeah, so this is our no results were found, right? So we're just going to have a simple message, no results found, try again. And in this case, that will show because it's inside this area, and with the else, we have not made it go away. We're keeping it, so it's still displaying. So that's just going to change that text. Okay, and that's pretty much it for now, I think. So we can go back to our event listener, and we can call this helper function here. So let's just call it. Hold on. Yeah, HandleSubmitClick. And we're not setting it equal anything. It doesn't return anything. It just takes care of a bunch of stuff. And we need it to go do that. And then the very last thing, and you guys know this too, is to prevent the default page reload, because the browser, when it sees a button of type submit, it tries to reload the page. So we don't want that to happen. We want them to stay on the page and see what we have prepared for them. So I think we've got this all wired up, and we can go try it now. So let's just try doing a search. Did not work. It's redoing the page. Why are you doing that? Yeah, okay. Something is awry because it is not type input. Oh, there it is. I forgot that HandleSubmitClick requires me to pass in the type input. So that way, when it goes to do its thing, it has the type because it doesn't have access to it. So I bet you anything that was it, but let's check just to make sure. All right. Again, not quite there. And it happened so fast. Okay. I keep clicking it so I can see what it says. 2 lowercase is not a function. Oh, I think I probably know what I did. Yeah. Okay. Where is it? What did I pass in? I passed in the objects, and I should have passed in their values. Because remember, these variables we created represent the element and for the input element. And the value actually represents what the user selects or types in or whatever. So of course it can't find that property on that. All right. So you see it took a second for the picture to load. And it looks crazy because we have no formatting yet because we haven't attached the CSS, but the stuff is here. It's all in the right order. We get the name of the drink, what type and whether it's alcoholic or not. We get its ingredients listed in those, LI, those list items. They're part of the unordered list. Then we get the directions as a paragraph. And then we have that last little sentence about, what type of glass you would use for this. So that's cool. We got our submit button working. So now we just need to work on the reset button. So we are going to only here, we're going to be calling the handler for this button. So we need to go do that and we'll come back and call it. The handler is here. It's very straightforward. We just need to reset current drinks and just say that it's equal to an empty array now. We want search results. Let's see, this is going to be the display of search results, I believe. So style.display. Because we're resetting, so we want those cards to go away. So we're going to basically just make that entire section hidden. And let's see, no results text is going to change back because we're about to make that visible again. And in this case, we've reset it. It's not really, a no results found kind of situation. So instead, we will say ready for a new search. And now that text has been set, we're going to make no results section visible again instead of search results, which we just set to none. So in the order in which you do this, normally things happen so fast that it kind of almost doesn't matter. But I put them in the order logically as it makes sense to me, which is that if it did take a really long time, you would not want this one showing up until this one's gone. And you would want this text to already exist before you change this from none to block and make it appear again. So that was kind of my logic for putting those in that particular order. Okay, and then later we'll have some animations, but we're not going to worry about it right now. So we can call this function, and this one does not take a parameter, so it is as straightforward as just calling handle reset click. And I realize that this is not very much stuff, and you might be wondering, well, why didn't you just do that one, inside the listener too? And the reason for that is because this later, when we have the animations in place, is going to be a very useful thing to call from other places, not just from inside the listener. So to have access to it, it needed to be outside the listener. And so I decided to go ahead and just put it all out here, just like I did here. And that way we can use this in other ways. We'll see that later on. Okay. Let's check out this reset button and see what happens here. So let's search for ones that have no alcohol and have milk in them. Why not? All right, 26 results found. We got some real pretty drinks. And I saw one with, okay. Yeah, okay, so basically we get those results back, and then what we expect when we hit clear all is for those to disappear and for us to get our glass and that new message back, right? So let's try it. And we have an error, so let's go see what I did. 92, handle reset click, assignment to constant variable. I think I did it again. I did. Okay, be careful about that. try not to assign things directly to the objects, assign them to their properties instead. So yeah, enter HTML. That would do it. Let's try it again. All right, so we get some results. And okay, something's not right about this filtering because it's giving me all 417 results regardless of which one of these is selected. But let's just check this first. Okay, so this is working. We get our glass back. We get the ready for a new search, which is different than the messages we had before. So we just need to go and figure out why. So let's do this. Let's put in a console log right after in our submit listener, which is where we're actually taking that value in. Let's console log right after that and see what is actually coming back. I just want to even see if it exists. That would be the first step. Okay. So it's correctly identifying it. So there's something about the way that it's being used that's not. Did I not put value in? I wonder if I didn't. Oh, yeah, that's it. There again, you have to access the properties. Wow. I can't believe I made that mistake 3 times, guys, but there it is. Okay. So now that I've passed in the value and not the object, I think we'll be okay. Okay, no alcohol, search, 45 results. That's what I was expecting. Okay. And if we, you can kind of test like if you have things in combination. So I want ones that are no alcohol and have juice, search. Now there's only 15 results because it filtered again. And then if you want to test all 3 of them together, you could test, punch, party, drink that doesn't have alcohol, that has juice, and search. And you're going to get exactly 1 result. Halloween punch, clearly. And then we'll clear it and it clears all and we get our empty glass back. Okay, so things are working pretty well. We just need to do our validations, so we'll get that in place. Let's go here. And there's going to be a couple things you want to do. Basically, okay, we read it in the instructions. Validate, okay. If the user forgets to select a radio button, we want to raise an alert message to let them know, and then make sure that handler isn't called. If they enter a keyword, but there's something other than alphanumeric characters or a hyphen, we're going to raise an alert message, and then also make sure the handler isn't called. And I've given you guys this regex because regular expressions is not something you're taught. It's something I actually still have a long ways to go to really get comfortable with this. But this is a really useful way to do a quick match. And there's some syntax you'll see in just a second. So what I kind of see here is like, we're saying we want to check this one and we want to make sure the handler is not called. If this one produces an alert, we want to make sure the handler isn't called. So probably what we want to do is put this in an else, get all of this in if else, because that way, you have, if the first, thing raises an alert, else if the second thing raises an alert. And it's okay to have that as like mutually exclusive because it's gonna check them all. And if it passes this one, it'll still get to this one. If it does this one, then it won't do this one, but it doesn't matter because they only need one message at a time. So we're good with that. So then we'll just kind of say else, and then take this and move it up into there. And okay, let's get ourselves some logic in here, right? So the first thing we want to say is, what if type input doesn't exist? And null is the best thing to use for that, because this one is a little different, because remember we said we're not tying it permanently to any one element. There's 3 different elements that we're looking at, and it's only going to tie it to one of them if that one is checked. The browser sees that it's checked. So if none of them are checked, that means nothing's coming back and this thing's just null. It's not connected to any of the 3 of them. So that's what we want to check for. And if that's true, we basically just want to have an alert, and we can just say, please select, alcoholic non-alcoholic. Oh yeah, wait, non-alcoholic. Yeah, non-alcoholic or both. And that will raise that lower. And something I like to do with the alerts too, so that on a Mac, I don't remember how they display on Windows, but on a Mac, it kind of crams the text all up against the top. So I like to put a new line character in there that will escape character so that it'll force it down and have a little space above it. That's just me. Okay, and the second one, let's actually test if that works, right? So let's take this out temporarily. We'll just test the first one, then we'll move on to the second one. So if I try to search and, oh, I'm in the wrong one, guys. I don't know if you get picked up on that, but I'm in the wrong one. Okay, so I'm gonna grab all this. We want it here. I don't know how it is that I managed to go to the wrong one. This one stays where it is. Okay, and then that means I need this here and this here. Yeah, because we don't need validation on the reset button, just on the submit button. So I was in the wrong listener. Okay, so this should work on the submit button now that we have the right place. So I'm not going to select anything on purpose. I could even select something else on purpose, but then it should raise that up. And I don't know if you can see that because I can't see it because of my Zoom bar, but yeah, it should have the little message that we have, and it has a little bit of space above it, which is nice. So we're going to do the same thing now for the keyword input, and I'm just going to paste this in real fast, but I'll talk about it. Basically, this just says if they did put something in, if it's not empty, because you don't want this alert to come up if it's just empty. So you have to make sure to check that, test for that first. And if the value does not match, so I've got that bang character in front. If this value, and I trimmed it down to make sure there isn't any like spaces, like leading or trailing spaces, because sometimes you type something in and you hit the space bar accidentally. We don't want to penalize them if they did that, because they didn't mean to be against the rules with having that space in there. So we'll just trim it first, and that takes care of it, so it won't trigger the alert. And then we check the match. This is so dot match. This is what you add on to a string. It's a string method that works with regular expressions. And then you just put the regular expression, no quotes around it or anything. You just put it just like that inside the parentheses for match. And it will go and match that pattern. So the patterns we have here are capital A to Z, lowercase a to Z, the numbers 0 to 9, and then I've added in, you see that backslash is escaping it, but I've added in a hyphen. Because some of these drinks are hyphenated, the names of them, and I thought it was useful. If we're gonna, restrict things, maybe we shouldn't restrict that. I also want to take this minute. Let's test it, but I want to talk about why. Okay, so let's just say I type in, or maybe a better example is orange juice. We should test that and say, yeah, and it comes up and says, oh, but why did it give me? Oh, because I didn't choose something. Okay, I need to choose something, and then to get to the second one. There you go. So it tells us that we need, only letters and numbers. Actually, I need to add the part about the hyphen. I actually didn't update that. Here's numbers and hyphens. That works. Okay. I think that it would be a better user experience. Two things. One, if you always automatically had this checked as the default value, but then two, if you did allow multiple terms and then had a way to search on like partial matches on terms. And it would take a more complicated algorithm to check for that. But I intentionally didn't go that direction on either of them, because for this assignment, for graded assignment 5, you guys have to practice validation. So I thought it would be better to kind of say, we're going to limit this by always having it empty. And so then, we can write some validation on those, and then we'll limit this to only being able to be a single word with very limited characters. And then we can do some validation on that, because it's good. You guys need to be able to have that practice, because you're going to need to use it for several different form inputs on your graded assignment. Okay, so now that we have the validation in place, we pretty much are done with all of that functionality. Let's take a look at our instructions. Right, okay, so our recipe card is going to depend when we add the CSS in, which we're about to do. The recipe card is going to depend on the object I was talking about up here with the color classes. So basically what this does is it comes up and looks and says, okay, if the drink is alcoholic, then we want the alcohol class. If it's non-alcoholic, we want the no alcohol class. And if it's optional alcohol, we want optional. And then down here where we create the HTML for each of the cards, we come up here and we say to color, okay, go to color classes, get for this drink that we're looking at right now in this for each out of all the current drinks, go to the type, to make it lowercase, and then that value is what we're going to check for as the property in color classes, because that value is going to be alcoholic, non-alcoholic, or optional alcohol. And then bring back the value that relates that actually is the name of the class, which is alcohol, no alcohol, or optional. And so then we're going to use it here. So what this basically does is this div is going to be a bar of color, kind of a vertical bar. And we've defined, this one takes care of like defining its width and, stuff like that. This one, though, is going to be a second class that's put right next to that class, and it'll be whichever one matched the type that we were checking for. So that way, different recipe cards can have different colors. It's just a great way to kind of mix it up a little bit. So I wanted to kind of include that to show you guys that that's how you would do that if you wanted to kind of mess around with being able to make things different that aren't just database, but actually relate to the style of things. So now that we have those in place, it will know what to do, and it can relate to those classes. Okay, so that now for the exciting part, we're going to go over here to our index of HTML, and we are going to uncomment all of these. Oh, I guess I did them one at a time. Oh boy, what did I do? Yeah, I did them one at a time. So the whole command, oh, it still doesn't like it. The command / thing can get a little messy with HTML. It doesn't always it doesn't always figure out what you're referring to when you're trying to do it. Okay, let's do a little bit of it manually. Okay, are we ready? Drum roll, please. Check it out. So what we have here is no longer a boring 1996 looking page. But we have some really nice styling, right? Got our logos all over here next to it. We got some cool fonts courtesy of Google. We've got a nice box here with everything really well arranged. I used Flexbox here. I can actually kind of show you. So up here in the dev tools, you've got this little thing where you can inspect items on the page, and you can kind of go around and look at it and see it has this little box there that pops up that tells you information about it. So you can see that that's the paragraph that has the ID of title, and this is the paragraph that has the ID of tagline. It tells you what color it is, what font it is. You can get lots of information. So down here, I go and I see, okay, this is my search area. That's that whole thing. And this one is the search row. I have two search rows. I have this one and this one. And in that row, all the space in between is because I can click on it and we can see I have this flex property called justify content in my CSS, and it's called space between. And it basically just takes things and starts with, justifies them so that one is at the far left, one is at the far right, and anything in between is evenly spaced. So you can see right there, there's even spacing between the category dropdown and the text box, and there's even spacing between that and the button group. which I have in a div together. So yes, and then down here you can see this is the no results area that's been defined that has the glass and the no results text down here. There's the no results text, there's the empty glass. So it really helps you be able to kind of dive around and see exactly what's happening everywhere. I highly suggest you get in the habit of using all this stuff as you're writing. And you can also see, of course, the console errors over here. But if you switch back and forth around to some of these different things, it can be really useful. Mostly, you want to just use elements in console when you're just doing front end stuff. So the last thing, and I realize it's almost 2 hours, but we're going to do this real quick because it's worth it. This is all looks cool. You know, we search for things. Oh, I didn't even show you the search. Yeah. So these are the cards I was talking about. And you can see that here's those different color bars I was talking about. If it's non-alcoholic, it's yellow. If it's optional alcohol, it's red. And if I choose both and do a search, you'll see that the alcoholic ones are blue. Those are the colors that are in the CSS. But yeah, I've gotten this kind of laid out with, the photo nice on the left, all the information kind of in here. If you have ones that are too long, I put a div inside a div. I just got to find one. Yeah, here's one. I put a div inside the div so that I can have the scroll property there, so that it doesn't like just fall off the edge of the thing, but it actually keeps it inside, and then you can read the whole thing when it's too long. Because I can't control that. That's the data that's coming from the API. That's their data. I can't edit it. I mean, I could, but we wouldn't want to. We want them to be able to read it all. Okay, Bob Marley, that's fun. Yeah, so there's our results, and you can see, if we keep, I think one of the other things too, like just, you could do like coffee and juice and prove that it can handle it when you have a search that brings back no results. And oh my gosh, I broke it, which means we didn't test that before. Okay. Why is it not resetting? So what's supposed to happen here is that we hit this and then it comes back and says, there's no results, but obviously we are missing something. Let's go look at that. HandleSubmitClick. All right, so it goes through, it filters, and if there are none, it's supposed to, that's not the one I meant to say. All right, I'll fix that. But I guess I do want to call this, and it doesn't matter. Okay, so that's my bad, sorry guys. I was trying to write the instructions going backwards by taking the animations out first, and I guess I didn't realize that this particular one, I actually do need it before the animations exist. But that makes sense, right? Because we want to change these results. So here's what's going to be messed up about it though, is that it's going to try to change the value twice. So I'm going to have to mess with that, because I definitely don't want it to change it to this right away. This isn't precisely what I want. Let's just see it in action though. I have tested this thing backwards and forwards and sideways, guys. So I must have just not, I must have something that's inconsistent with my solution, and I just don't know what it is. But all right, now let's go and try to do this and see what happens. Yeah, so it's appearing like it's supposed to, but it's changing the words, and that is not strictly what I want. So I will have to I'll have to fix that before I post a solution for you guys. I think I know what I need to do. I'm not going to take the time to do it right now. Okay, so let's get back to these animations, and there's full instructions for this, so that you can go through painstakingly and kind of figure it out. But basically, what I have done is provided just about everything just for you to copy and paste then, because a lot of it is just style related. Okay, so this is where we're going to go over, and we're going to find our search area and uncomment these, because now we want it to start out where that whole area is The whole search box, the form is actually going to start off not being on the page because we're going to animate it. And then same thing with the results area. Both of those sections are going to start off. Why are you doing this to me? Okay, there again. CSS also is not crazy about command slash. So now we have that. And then the last thing is the keyframes. So this is how you can define animation. So basically what we've got going on here is a fade in that takes whichever one we apply it to from opacity 0 to opacity 1. So it'll be invisible and then it'll slowly fade until it's completely opaque. And then this one, which I call zoom spin, is going to take an image and it's going to rotate it starting at 0 degrees and ending on 1080. So that's three full rotations. And it's going to start at 10 pixels and end up at 250 pixels wide. So it'll kind of zoom in and spin at the same time. This one is spin only. So if it's already there, we don't need to zoom it in. We just need to rotate it. And I kind of decided that 720, like 2 spins, kind of looked better in this situation. So now that we have those, we can go back over here and we can start adding some things in. Okay, so it tells us here to take the search area and define it. So we're going to start up here and define our search area. And then we'll go back and we'll get these. This is for the other two, the results area. And now we have to have a reference to that empty glass because that's what we want to spin. That's the image we're going to spin. So we'll put, yeah, let's put them both here. I guess technically I intended for them to go separately. Oh my goodness. Separately because I tend to like to put things in order of the order that they're on the page. It just helps me keep track of things. Okay, and then here we have a whole section we need to add in. And the basic goal for this is to make sure that the animations trigger as soon as the page is brought up. Because remember, when we get done loading all of our data that we fetched and init fires, we create the objects for reference. We make sure that drop-down box is populated, and then we trigger any animations. But it has to be done. Oh, I'm sorry. I did this the wrong way around. This one belongs. These are the functions that make all the changes that actually do it, but that one belongs down here at the end, yeah. And then what we need up in that other place is probably what's next, yes. Okay, I knew it looked long and I'm like, I don't remember that being so long, but I wasn't like really looking at it. Yeah, so here we want this. This just goes and calls fade in search box, fade in results area, and spin glass, which are the things we just added. So let's take a look at that. Fade in search box basically takes the search area, this is a form, and changes from none and none, like it was over here in styles that we just set up here somewhere. It now changes them to block, and then this is how we define that animation. So the animation property gets fade in, that's the name of the animation, the keyframes that we define, and then we want it to be for 3 seconds. Take 3 seconds to do that, to go from 0 to 100%. The fade in results area is the same thing, exactly the same, except for it's 2 seconds instead of 3. And we'll use this one over and over again. This only happens the very first time. And this one, reset results area, is going to be used to change the results area back to none when we need to reset the animations in order for it to pay attention to the fact that while the animation has already been played, we actually want to play it again. And then on that note, the spin glass one is a lot more complex because the only way to get it where you can just keep using it over and over and over again in this particular instance was to do kind of these extra steps. And you can look this up, you can read about it if you want, to get animations and what this does. I had to do a little research to figure it out and took some trial and error, but it's gonna be cool when we're done with it, I promise. And then happening. Okay, In the reset button event listener, we're going to replace HandleSubmitClick with this conditional that contains it only if it is true, if something's already there. And so we'll put that, let's see, yeah. So we're going to just replace this there. And then we will go back and do something similar here. We're going to add, oh, this is a completely new event listener. Okay. So this is a bit of an Easter egg that we're putting into our application here, where the glass itself is going to be clickable. It's not just going to respond when the submit or reset buttons are clicked. You can actually go and spin the glass just by clicking on it, which is a nice little twist. Okay. Inside the HandleSubmitClick function, so this is the handler, we have some things that we need to add at the top. Let's see, so and the order of these is important, which is why I have it laid out that well. So handle, yeah, so right here, I'm going to replace this to do with that. And that's going to reset that results area before we, put together, filter all the drinks and get ready to display them and all that. We're just going to temporarily hide everything and remove any existing animations. Okay. And then, sorry, wrong file. This one is similar. We're going to call that fade in results area, but we have to put it in a timeout. We don't have to, but we want to, because it takes a minute for the pages to load, for the pictures to load. And so if you put a little bit of delay before the fade starts, it provides a better experience for the user. And we can test that in a second when everything's in place. We can comment that out and test it. Let's get the rest of the stuff in here. Okay, in the else block just after the trigger animations. Okay, never mind. It's the same thing. I am going to have to fix that, but that's fine. We'll go with it for now. Okay, inside the handle reset click function, we want to add this below trigger animations. So this has to do with the reset button, not the submit button. Yeah, here. So what this is going to do is reset the results area, fade in the results area, and spin the glass as soon as we reset everything. So let's go see if it's working. Crossing my fingers that it does, because obviously I've got some errors in places. Okay, let me check my console too. Okay, I'll refresh this just in case. Yeah, there we go. And that's actually a lot bigger than it's supposed to be. Maybe it's because, maybe not. Yeah, I guess I just didn't have it as tall as I did before. Okay, so we have that glass kind of coming in. So when the page first loads, you see this thing is fading in, this one's spinning and growing, and it kind of naturally pushes that text down as it grows, which is an interesting side of effect that I was not at all sad about. And now we can do some searches. So if we search for all the alcoholic drinks, you see how they faded in? There's a little bit of a pause. So if we go over here and actually take that off, let's try that again. Oh, I think it includes displaying it, so I can't do it that way. I have to do it in faded in the results area, which is here. Yeah, if we take out the animation, that's it. We want the display, but not the animation. Okay, so let's do a quick search. Yeah, you see how it just kind of boomed? And if you do it with all of them, like the first time the data exists, it takes a while to build those pictures. Oh, it's lying now. Sometimes there's a delay. I guess it depends on how fast your internet is. If your internet was a lot slower than mine, which mine's pretty fast, then it definitely would be a little bit of a problem. So that's why we have that delay in there, so that when the animation is running, it'll actually like take a minute. Not a minute, it's only 150 milliseconds, so that's 0.15 seconds. But it accommodates that image loading, so it gives you a pretty smooth, you can pretty much count on everything being there as it starts to fade in, and the picture won't, still be waiting to load. Okay, and I think, so we hit the clear all, it does the spinny thing again. But if we hit clear all again and there's no results here, then it just spins it. It doesn't zoom it back in. And then same thing when you click on the glass. You can sit here and click on the glass just for fun. But that is the app.